Hello, 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 everybody. It is Tanika Steens, and I am the Mindful Coach. Welcome to Mind Your Business tonight. My guest is Dr. Stephanie Ryan. She is a PhD who is a chemist and a boy mom. And she is also a social media influencer who enjoys using her background to create superior educational products and content. Although Dr. Ryan is an academic at heart, she is passionate about learning through play. She can be found helping young kids explore the fascinating world all around them. Over the years, Dr. Stephanie has taught science to all age groups, both in and out of the classroom, helping toddlers learn about their world and college students define theirs. Dr. Stephanie earned her PhD in learning sciences and her MS in analytical chemistry from the University of Illinois at Chicago. She earned her BS in chemistry from St. Mary's College. For great learning activities, because I know recently I did a talk on autism and children that have behavior disorders and different things like that. This could be something that is fundamental. So you might want to tune in so you can learn about these learning activities in sciences. And she recommends some books. So follow Dr. Stephanie on Instagram at Let's Learn About Science. And after we get her on here and get to talking, I'm sure she's going to tell you some more information about how you can learn more about how to get involved and how to help your learners get more involved in science and just help them to be better achievers as well. So, thank you, Dr. Stephanie, for joining us tonight. Welcome. Please let us learn more about who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
That is a tall order. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome.
So I am, like you said, a boy mom. And during the pandemic, I released a book for children about chemistry. And because of the pandemic, we had to push pause and I couldn't go to bookstores and do live readings and things like that. So I created an Instagram account that was, I'm going to be honest, it was probably more for me than for others at the beginning, just to get through that. I had a reason every day to document what I was doing and really stay on track with my son. But I found that other parents really, it was helping them. That things that I was taking for granted from my background of the types of questions I might ask weren't things that everybody just had come to them naturally. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I can approach this instead of just looking at it for the child, look at it for the parent too, because these parents are now becoming teachers.
Yes.
And so I had a bit of a pivot with that, and that's where my life's been the last, like, gosh, this pandemic's been going on for a while. So I'd say probably the last 18 months or so, that's what I've been working on. But I write curricular materials and assessments for state standardized tests. That's my jam in the background.
All right. And so, I can tell you that there is a lot of things that got birthed in this pandemic. And a lot of parents did have to be faced with the challenge of homeschooling. I know that my children are virtual learners now. I do homeschool. I have 3 children at home and one in college. And that transition, we tried to do the best that we could to transition and help them through that and make sure we had resources for them. But I can only understand how hard it was for some parents that may not have had those tools and resources. And so for you to do what you did, and see, sometimes when we do something, we don't realize when we're helping ourselves, it's actually helping others. And so by what you did, I'm sure it opened up the door and gave opportunity to other families that were at home learning to be able to have some better resources. And so, when did you realize that, wow, this is really not just helping me, but it's helping others as well? When did you get that?
I feel like it was somewhere along the way. I did one of the live events of where, was doing an experiment with a podcast, maybe where we were paired for the Instagram live. And somebody just said, like, I never would have thought to ask that. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, like, it felt so natural for me to ask. But then again, I'm a qualitative researcher. I'm really trained at how to ask these questions to get at what your child understands. And so that's not really a fair assessment. And so what I I was talking to my son's preschool teacher, and she called for his parent teacher conferences, which he wasn't at school. So she asked me how he was doing. And I told her, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I was like, I usually teach older kids. Set me in a middle school, elementary, or even high school, college, but pre-K, woo, teaching the alphabet and how to write. That wasn't my background. And I said, I just don't know if I'm doing enough. And she asked me, okay, what are you doing? And I told her, like, well, today we planted some stuff in the garden. He helped me in the sink. And she listed off all the skills he was getting that I wasn't thinking about. And so that while we were pouring water in the sink, he was learning about measuring that one cup was bigger than the other and like getting at those little skills and then just exploring the world around him. And it really changed my perspective. And that's when those two things put together, the Instagram account kind of took off.
Yeah.
Because it was like, if I'm having this problem with my child and I'm feeling this insecure, other parents must be as well. And while I can't help them necessarily with teaching the alphabet, because that one was still a struggle for me to get him to write and things like that. And I sought out help for those. But for science, I can definitely help with STEM. So
Yeah.
that,
And STEM is so great right now. I mean, I really am excited about STEM, and my girls all have been involved in STEM. And I've talked to some parents that have no clue what that is, and I'm like, oh my goodness, you got to learn more, and you got to get involved. So can you talk about that a little bit, just since you brought it up? Can you like kind of explain what STEM is and how it helps our children in math and science and learning all together?
yeah, so STEM is also called STEAM sometimes if it includes art. It's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And to some of us who went to school years and years ago, that might sound like facts, like learning facts in a book. That's not the way it's taught anymore. And now it's these skills that we're teaching our kids: how to justify a claim with your reasoning, how to set up an experiment, or how to ask a question that you can test, things like that. And so the knowledge is in there too. So the disciplinary information is there, but it's also these skills and recognizing patterns. And those are all things that you don't have to buy a lot of stuff to do. So for patterns, you can do this with really young children, and you can, get colored macaroni or get different kinds of pasta and have them string different patterns. One of my favorite pattern activities to do with my son is with yogurt and granola. I set out the ingredients and we label them as however many we have. Let's say we have 5. He labels them A through E, and then he makes a pattern and he has to repeat it till he runs out. And so that shows like, oh wow, I didn't have enough popcorn for this one, so I can't repeat. And that kind of skill is something that you don't need to spend a lot of money, buy a kit, things like that. Although that said, if people are looking for science kits and things like that, now is the best time. There's so many great things out there, and I'm jealous that I wasn't a kid now.
I know, right? Yeah. I mean, everything you're saying, I can identify with because I struggled there for a minute. Then I'm like, oh God, I'm failing this kid. Because when we went into the pandemic, it was her first year in kindergarten. It was crazy. And then now she's home. And so, she wasn't being able to be engaged with other children her age. And so she's got older sisters. Her next sister to her is 7 years older than her. And so then it goes up from there. And then we have a 17 and an 18-year-old. And so they're all more mature and older than her. And so she sees some of the things that she does. And so I'm looking and I'm thinking, okay, how can I keep this at her level? And so I started realizing that when we're in the bathroom, I have her to look at different things and identify objects that are the same or what's the same colors and things. And so I truly understand that, and it's a learning experience. And it's easier than when we're sitting down with pen and paper, like you said, trying to teach the alphabet, and it's like they don't want to do that. But when I say, okay, and we try to make it fun and we turn it into a project, it becomes more of an experience and it's more hands on and they feel like that they're actually a part of it. So it's definitely a new way because everybody doesn't learn the same. and I've learned that with all of my children, that they all have different learning patterns and behaviors. And so when you can find something that speaks to their needs, it's awesome. And so you have created content. Can you talk about this content that you've created that helps?
Yeah. So, one of the things that, okay, so I guess I'll start with the struggle that I had. And
Okay.
it reminded me a lot of when I was little, school came pretty easy to me. But sometimes a different parent might be better to like learn something with. My sister and I definitely had different things we liked to learn with different parents because it was just like hitting a brick wall. And I never had that happen until trying to copy the alphabet. We would have the things with the lines on it to like write, and I would have dry erase, and he would just groan and like he would he would become a kid he wasn't. And
Mm-hmm.
I was I couldn't figure out how to get that to go. And I just gave in and I thought, let's do what he wants to do and I'll incorporate it instead. And so he's an only child. And we also had the socializing concern. But I was also concerned that he was missing out on pretend play.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, but I'm not a huge pretender. So it did not come naturally to me. I would just be like, hi, I am Spider Man. And like, I don't know what else to say, Like, what are they doing? So I just felt like he was missing out, especially after it became like more than a year. I was worried that he was missing out on learning about community helpers and wearing costumes and doing all of that. So that's when I started the idea of a new job per week. And he picked them all out. We had costumes for each. And so there was pretend play associated. So one day of the week was pretend. Another day of the week, I went on to Teachers Pay Teachers. And I only grabbed free resources because I was really trying to help out the parents in this one by finding free things. And they were all pre-K skills. So like pen control, writing, or cut and paste. But they were all themed to the job. So like to learn about the fire triangle, you would color in which thing you would put out on the fire to get it to stop. And learning about colors, primary colors for artists and things like that. So he learned all these things and he wrote without me having to like force it down his throat. And he begged to do it. Mommy, can we do more worksheets? And I was like, that's so funny because this is a different kid. So that would be 1 or 2 days. And then there would be some sort of products that are out there that parents could buy if they wanted. Because, like I said, there's a ton of great stuff. There's also a ton of stuff out there that's not great. That has the STEM or STEAM label on it just to be buzzwords. So I try to help parents sort through that of what's good and what's not. And then we also did an expert. So that was really easier to do when everyone was at home because people were able to make these videos and do interviews more often. So that one has kind of dried up a little bit and I'm working on getting it back. But finding an expert in every field is not as easy as you would think. But we would have that, and sometimes they would answer the kids' questions. And so, like, I interviewed an astronaut
Wow.
and he answered. I asked them in exactly the way the kids asked. And like my son asked, do you have a backpack? And like things like that. And he giggled a little while he said it. And he's like, kind of. I have a pack that I wear when I'm out in space. But
Yeah.
it was great because parents who were stuck at home and couldn't have guest speakers had this resource that they could go to and learn something. And then the last thing we did was books. That's another thing there's a ton of out there. And you just don't know. And I went through and found books that paired well with all of that. And sometimes it's one book because, like, for being a lawyer or a judge, that one was a little tricky to find stuff. But then there are some like gardening that there are hundreds out there, and I had to draw the line at a few.
That's awesome. I mean, and it's really creative because we can. when we look within and we realize that, we're struggling here, what do we do? And then we start looking around saying, okay, let me see about using this. And then you incorporate it. And like you said, and then you've been helping other parents, influencing them to look and see the resources that they can use around them. I mean, it's really good because I think outside of the classroom, we think a lot of the all only learning is done in the classroom. But I think more knowledge is attained outside of the classroom just by your environment and being able to incorporate that in something that is useful and to say, hey, we're experimenting today, or we're pretending to be a doctor or a lawyer, or and then being able to play out those roles. It's fun and it's exciting because it gives them a sense of identity, and also being able to identify with when they do see this doctor or the lawyer or whatever. They recognize that and understand, I could be that, or this is something that I could do based off of that. Is fabulous. I think that is awesome. And I think a lot of parents can really, because it's not about the kids. Truth, I'm just going to say this. It's not about the kids. It's about the parents, because we're responsible for these little things. And we have to make sure we are instilling and giving them great value. We can't expect them to do it on their own. And so if we left it to them, they wouldn't be trying to figure this thing out. They'd just be like, but when we incorporate it and we're able to be that advocate for them, I think it really makes them understand that, okay, let me try at least. And so kudos to you, because you said you're a boy mom, and I was thinking about you talking about the costumes and things. I'm a girl mom, and we have all kind of costumes. We play characters, we do all kind of crazy stuff all the time. And so in that aspect, that was a little bit more natural for me. But there are other parents, like you said, that are struggling, that are on a different level, that have a different situation and are looking for help. So thank you for being that help and for not just using it for yourself, because sometimes we can do things and then we don't realize that if we give that stuff away, we're helping others, and then we are getting something valuable in return. And so I commend you for what you're doing. I appreciate the fact you took time out to come and talk to us tonight. What else is it that you would like for us to know or to understand about these different ways to influence our children and to incorporate these things into our daily lifestyle?
Well, I think, like you said before, it helps them develop a sense of identity. And that is a major thing of representation in the sciences. So, when I was a kid, you drew a scientist, it was a white man with crazy hair, glasses, and a lab coat, and he was old. And so that's changed, and you ask kids now to draw. Sometimes they actually draw themselves. They'll draw people who look like them, or they'll draw someone they know. Because when I was growing up, the only scientists were the ones in the books, and they were all dead. So it didn't feel like science was this ever changing thing
Yeah, yeah,
that it really is. And so I think that adding that in, of letting them play and do that and feel that, is really good too. But also the agency that they get during it, of where they say, I'd really like to learn about this. Well, cool. Let me try this next week. I'm going to need a few days to find all these resources, but I'm going to do my best. And then you kind of go with it, and you can actually, this was something that as a curriculum developer was a little tricky for me, because I'm so used to, the table of contents. That's the order you go in. But with your child at home, you don't really have to approach it that way. And you can get at a lot of content just in a different way than you meant to. And so my son, I would let him, focus on what he liked. And sometimes there would be something he wasn't as into, like he wasn't as into the Earth Day activities because they were a little more for older kids. But he really loved learning about being a doctor and the human body, and he just went down that rabbit hole. And he would ask, "Mommy, can I get a puzzle of the human body?" And I'm like, "Sure." You're an interesting 4-year-old here. He would
yeah,
draw muscles and skeletons and stuff, and I'm just like, "Hey, you really like this, let's keep going." And so he likes learning about organs. And so we haven't done the other subjects, but he loves to talk about that. And it's like, you know what? even if he doesn't end up becoming a doctor or whatever, he still felt like he had control of some of his learning,
Yeah.
and it was fun.
Yeah. And see, and that's what I believe when it says learning is fundamental. That's how it's fundamental, and that's how you put the fun in learning. And being able to approach it, because I think sometimes learning is scary for kids, and they think it's so much. Because my daughter told me one day, she's like, "But you're just so smart, and you just know all this stuff," and I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm older, and I've learned these things." But I had to learn it at some point. I said I didn't just wake up one day and know some of the stuff that I'm telling you. And so, because I am horrible in math. I mean, math was like one of the worst things for me, and I never could understand the concept of how to approach math. And it's until I started working in retail, when I got in retail management, always was intrigued with numbers. I just didn't understand how they work. And when I got into retail management, I finally, for the first time, understood these figures and these numbers and how to project them and what they look like and why they added up. And I'm like, they always add up. And so when she's having trouble in biology or something, and I'm like, okay, here, this is what we do. I'm showing her how to reason, and I'm showing her how we can look at things and draw conclusions. And I'm like, that's math. And I thought to myself, wow, I've learned something helping her. And then I'm like, I promise you, this is just all about being able to reason, just being able to think of things, drawing conclusions. And I said, and if you just think about something, and what what is the reason here? Why are we doing this? What is the truth in it? And she's like, well, that makes sense when you say it like that. And I'm like, yeah. And I said, and we just figured that out together. So, I mean, I think learning and exploring with your child is really exciting, and it makes them feel good to see that maybe sometimes you don't have all the answers, but you are learning it and figuring it out together.
And that is super important. So that is something that I was a perfectionist growing up, and with that probably comes anxiety. um, but I was really careful when he was really small to model when I make a mistake so that he can see that adults make mistakes. Because I think children always think that they think their parents know everything, they never mess up. And that just leads to that perfectionism. And
Yeah.
so I am always really careful. And actually, I went a little too far where I'd be like, whoops, mommy messed up. And it was like, mommy always messes. Well, mommy doesn't always mess up. She just tells you when she does.
Yeah, yeah.
But so there's a minute where you have to kind of get over your own ego as a parent.
Yes.
That is difficult the older you are because of the way school was. So when I was in school, your teacher was right, the answer was right, and that's all there was. And if you didn't know it, you sure didn't tell anybody you didn't know something. You just kind of sat there quietly. Where now, I mean, my son will say, I don't know, let's ask Siri or let's ask Alexa, and they're just so used to
Yeah.
this, like, let's go find information.
Yes.
And why are we feeling weird about it? Like, it should just be like, cool, let's look this up together. Let's
Yeah.
both look this up. And that's how I came up with the series, things, what is it on TikTok? It's things my kids said on the way to pre-K today, or asked questions. And I actually research anytime I don't know a question, I turn it into a TikTok video.
Hmm.
And I'll be like, me, grown adult here, did not know the answer to this. And I show where I looked it up. And I think it's good to see that we don't always know all the answers. And scientists don't know the answer. That's why they do science, to
Yes.
find the answer.
Exactly. And I love exploratory learning as well. And I tell my children, ask questions. I don't care. Just ask questions. And I think that a lot of times children do get scared to ask questions. And because I know sometimes when you ask them and they just look at you, but I have one that'll say, I don't know, can you help me? And I'm like, I sure can help you. But then she got to the point where now she wants you to help her do everything. And I'm like, no, you have to figure this out on your own. And sometimes it's so funny because how you take different approaches. Because I've got one that I'm like, okay, I'm going to help and do this with you. Another one, I'm like, no, I need you to do it on your own. And then sometimes I'm like, okay, maybe I'm being too tough. But then she comes back and she was like, okay, I found it right here. And I'm like, yeah, you just wanted me to do it. And I go, you're good because you know how to get people to do what you want. And sometimes, she had us fooled thinking that she didn't know how to do things until we went to the store one day and she read the whole sign. And we were like, and then she's like, oops. And we're like, oops, what do you mean, oops? But she reads everywhere she goes. She reads everything. And then she'll try to read under her breath. And we're like, oh, you think that if you don't get it, we're gonna say, okay, we'll push it to the side. But now we're like, we make her read everything, and so she'll start doing it before we get to her. But I think that is so great. What would you say to parents like right now? Someone is struggling that maybe is at a loss for words, that is feeling like they're failing as a parent with helping their child. What would you say to that parent right now?
I would say cut yourself some slack. That they, it's hard for us to remember what it was like to be that blank slate that they are. So, like, a baby is literally learning that if I drop something, it falls.
Mm-hmm.
So the bar is a little low, like it's lower than we're setting ourselves up for.
Yeah.
And the other thing I like to tell parents is that it's okay if they're wrong. In fact, it's good that they're wrong. As long as they're explaining what that's going on in their head, it'll get fixed in the end. Let them have this wrong understanding and have them approach the world, and the world can help change it. So you can offer them an activity. Like, let's say, for example, 2 years ago, we were making popsicles, still during the pandemic somehow, 2 years ago. But we were making them, and I said, "Hey, where should I put these to make the popsicles? Like, what do we do now?" And he was like, "Put them in the oven." And I was like, all of me, the scientist mom, wanted to be like, "What? Like, come on, man." And I stopped myself and I said, let's try it. And so we tried it with water and a silicone because I didn't want to ruin our popsicles. We did that. We put it outside. We ended up putting it in the refrigerator. And then finally, we ended up in the freezer. And it drove me a little nuts at the time because, one, it took so long,
Yeah.
but it took so long. Like, think of the time that your kid is like being active and double checking what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And a few months later, it was like raining and then also snowing, like right while we were driving. And he was like, "Mommy, look, that liquid is freezing and it's turning into a solid, just like in the freezer." And I was like, "What?"
There you
I
go.
have never taught you this. But he applied it because he did it. So
Yes.
this wrong understanding he had, he'd get a new piece of information, he would build on it. Nope, that's still wrong. And yes, it took a little while, but he did it instead of me shutting him down and making him feel like he didn't understand. I'm not going to offer any answers ever again because my ego is hurt. Where now he's just like, I can be wrong. I will figure it out. We'll get there. And it's just such a different attitude that I hope he carries on.
Yeah. So one more thing I wanted to talk to you about. I spoke about children with autism, and I have a friend that has started a camp for autistic children because her son is autistic, and so we've talked a lot about different approaches. And one day she was talking to me, and she goes, it's so weird because I gave him these chicken nuggets that were dinosaurs, and he wouldn't eat them. She said, I'm trying to explore things that would be fun for him. And she said, when I gave him these chicken nuggets, he just looked at me and was like, no, I'm not eating those. And she said, I could not convince him that they were chicken nuggets. And so a couple of days later, I was at the grocery store and I started thinking, well, because dinosaurs are not chicken nuggets. And his reasoning was, those are not chicken nuggets, they're dinosaurs, and people don't eat dinosaurs. And so, her and I talked, and she was like, that's exactly what it was. And she goes, but she was like, I just don't understand, why is he being selfish and not wanting to eat these things, or he's being stubborn. And I'm like, no, he's not being stubborn. But the way he connects that is, now if it was a toy, it'd be different. But dinosaurs are either toys or animals, or they're not food. People don't eat them normally. And so I told her, I said, he's very smart. And he is, matter of fact, that no, it's not a chicken nugget. And so when have you had to work with children in that capacity, or how do you feel like this could be something that could help them in that area.
I think that, well, I haven't worked specifically with children with autism. I know several people who have children that are autistic. But the thing that I would suggest, and you nailed it right on the head, was finding out what they meant. As parents, we often hear what they say and we put it through our own lens. And it's often not that. It's often a simpler, like, um, usually not at all what we thought. And it's have them draw, have them act it out, play with them, and or listen to them while they're taking a bath and playing, because then you'll get some things that pop out in their conversation that they might be struggling with. What are
Mm-hmm.
they afraid of? Like, let me think. There was a time when my son was doing a drawing and he drew a dark cloud, and we could tell something was wrong, and we asked him about it, and finally we got it out through his drawing, like that he was upset about something. But if he had just went ugh and thrown a tantrum, I would have put him in timeout. It would have been handled in a very different way. But because I knew he needed a minute, I was like, why don't you go draw? And then he drew and came back. And then we had a better conversation. I mean, they're little humans.
Yeah.
That's how I would want to be treated.
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget that.
I totally agree. And I'm glad that you brought that up. It's important that we understand that. Because I think as adults, sometimes we get so bogged down with life and going from one thing to the next and, hurrying up and getting things done, from the bed to the car to the school to the office, back home to dinner to, it's like we have these routines. Children, they need routines, but normally they have to be trained in this way. And the funny thing about it is, kids don't always cooperate and go with the flow because, like you said, they are these little humans that have their own perspectives. And sometimes, if we take the time and just understand how to meet their needs, it's not such a struggle to try to play tug of war. And I learned that with one of my children that was having struggles when she was going to school and public schools. When you put her in a classroom, she would get lost. She would just close up. She wouldn't, and she was a very active child. But when you put her around a lot of other children, she would just, the noises, the lights, all the people, it would wear her down. So we ended up putting her in a charter school where it was a smaller classroom. She was able to get up and be more free and more flowing. By the time she got to middle school, we put her back in public schools, and she was able to adapt because she was used to that environment of being able and seeing people coming and going. And so every child we have is different. And my thing is, I'm not going to compare you to what the other one is doing because it was easy for them, but we've got to find out what works for you. So I
Well,
commend you in what
and I
you're doing
think
in
that
that.
that's important for us as parents too. One, that our children see that, right? So that, hey, mommy needs a minute because the way you just yelled at me, although I forgive you, like, I just need a minute. Like,
Mhm.
I have feelings too. And letting them know that, like, that you are human, because as adults, we often just kind of put on the happy face around kids and
Yeah.
then walk away, where they don't see that's I actually hurt your feelings.
Hmm.
That's something I need to think about. And then we also need to not compare ourselves to other moms. And that's a good message during the holidays, is that do what works for you. And I don't know, like during Halloween week, I don't remember what it was about it, but something was just like, it was so busy. And my son started kind of ticking things off like a checklist. Like, when are we going to do the jack o' lanterns? And I was like, who says we have to do a jack o' lantern? Like, we have pumpkins. That's cool. We're going trick or treating. That's fun. Like, we're doing all these things. Why do we have to do that? I don't think any of us actually wanted to. It was just like, when are we going to? And so that's kind of my approach to the holidays this year is what do we want to do? What can we physically do? So, like, my son is getting his second vaccine tomorrow. So we're not doing Thanksgiving because he's probably going to be a little cranky, tired, and it was just like, why do that to ourselves just because of a checklist?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're so right. I agree with families. You have to do what works for you. our schedule sometimes is so crazy that we do things at different times, and some people may not agree with that, but it's like it works for us. So you have to do what works for your family, and make sure that you're having healthy, happy, smart kids. My 17-year-old told me that last night. She goes, I remember things that you told me when I was little. And I was like, well, tell me one good thing. She's like, you told me I was happy, healthy, and smart. And I started laughing, and I'm like, yeah, I used to tell you that every single morning. And this kid has never been sick. I mean, ever. Because I'm always like, you're healthy. You don't get sick. And it's so funny. She has never, ever, like, even really caught a cold or anything. And so I think the things that we tell our kids, good or bad, it does stick to them. They understand it, they see it, and sometimes they take it to heart. Sometimes they let things roll. But we've got to reinforce those things, and not only in them, but in us. And so, thank you for speaking to parents and letting them know don't be hard on yourself. It's okay. Every day I go, did I do a good job today? Did I fail? Is everybody okay? Everybody's okay. So we're fine. We're good. But I mean, just taking the time and learning. I think that my husband calls them pandemic children now because of everything that's going on. But I think these children are going to actually be better off in the future. A lot of them because of what they've had to go through, a different way of learning, a more hands on way. I think parents have been more involved. And I think just being able to have different approaches, they're going to be able to see the world a different way. And maybe with their children, it won't be so, because we were always, everything was by the book. And now nothing's by the book anymore. So I think that this new way of learning and the way that you have helped incorporate that and share that with parents, I think it is great. And I thank you. So help us to understand, because we know we can go to Let's Learn About Science. Is there anywhere else we can find you to learn more about you, your resources, and what you have to offer to the world?
Yeah, so my website, let'slearnaboutscience.com, is currently being reworked, but it has a sort of a blog. It's not totally up yet. But what it does is it pulls in some of the Instagram stuff into like one place. And I also have my book that I wrote that started the whole thing, Let's Learn About Chemistry. I highly recommend it if you have a child between 0 and 7. It's a really good one to get at those skills that we were talking about, not necessarily the content, but the skills.
Mm-hmm.
And they play a game, much like the one you said you did with your kids of what's similar and what's different. It's which of these is not like the other and why. And it uses their toys to have them think about it in that way. So that's a good place. And then TikTok, I post the question and answer videos there.
Cool.
And that's Let's Learn About Science as well.
Okay. And so you said it's on TikTok or Instagram. You don't have any YouTube videos?
There are plans for a YouTube channel to put up those interviews that I do with
Yes.
the experts and possibly with the question answer series on TikTok. But that falls into that category of I would love to, but at the moment I do not have the capacity.
I understand. And I can even see you doing a podcast and having that information available. So I really learned a lot. I appreciate you taking the time out during this busy holiday season. And with all you're doing, I appreciate you coming on and just lending your service to tell us more about how we can incorporate ourselves in learning with our children. Because, I mean, even on those days where they're bored or whatever, these are things that we can do to help them to be more ready to learn and explore and learning. So thank you. We do value your time, so we will not hold you up any longer. Let you get back to your family. But we appreciate you, and we look forward to hearing more from you. And I will definitely be following you on Instagram and TikTok to get more of those resources because I need them. So thank you. If there's anything else you'd like to say before we jump off of here, you're free to do so.
The only other thing I would tell parents is that scientists also make mistakes. And so I like to highlight to parents that I mess up experiments at home all the time with my son. And if it does not go right the first time you did it, that's fine. And it's almost more fun when it doesn't work because then you and your child made a mess and you can talk about what happened, what mistake mommy made or daddy, depending on who's listening. But those things, I think that we're hard on ourselves because we see picture perfect things on Pinterest or in magazines. And when it doesn't come out that way, we're like, oh no, how was I not a gourmet chef? Well, I wasn't trained as a gourmet chef. Why would I be? And so
Absolutely.
I think that's something we need to remember, and just know that anything we post on Instagram and TikTok has been filmed several times. Everybody does. There are
Absolutely.
mistakes along the way.
Well, thank you so much. So, listen, like Dr. Stephanie said, cut yourself some slack. It's okay to be wrong. You don't have to be a scientist. You can just be a mom or a dad and do this fun stuff with your children, and it'll make you feel like you're a scientist, right? So let's try it. let's try to incorporate some more learning one on one with our children with just things that we have around the house. The other day, my daughter taught me a new way of folding a towel. She wrapped it around her body, stepped outside of it, double it over, and I was like, I did a TikTok video on that because I was impressed. Because I was like, whatever works, let's get it done. And that's one less towel that I had to fold. Now, I know what people might say, but she put her body inside of it and folded it up. Well, she'll be using that towel. And everybody in this house is always the same people in this house. So whoever gets it, they'll be okay too. But I'm just saying, incorporate fun learning things with your kids. If they make a mess, even if you make a mess, it's okay. Messes can be cleaned up. But those memories that we make will last a lifetime. Those impressions that we instill, those values that are taught are something that they will hold on to forever. So this is a way that we can get more time, more investment in being with our child, teaching them, and also learning something ourselves. So thank you for tuning in tonight. I hope you got something out of this. If you want to learn more, go to let's learn about science.com with Dr. Stephanie. Get her book. Where's your book at? Tell them where to get this book.
You can get it on Amazon or on my website. You can follow the link to buy the book now, and it can take you to the distributor. But Amazon does have it with Prime shipping, I believe, currently. So that's a good place.
Okay, and we'll also put a link on our website so that way you'll have access there as well. So thank you. Have a good holiday. Um, Try not to eat too much, but if you do, it's okay. You deserve it. Do whatever you feel like is necessary for you to be in a good spirit and be kind to somebody. And remember, never forget, you were created with a purpose. So let's go be great. Have a good evening and thank you for joining us. Now let me see if I can get us out of here.